welcome everybody to another edition of UnBolted. I am MJ Bolt, your host of UnBolted, and today we have with us Marc Anthony Bru, who is a J6er, and he is here to tell his story of the events that inspired. Marc, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for setting this up for me. Appreciate it.
You bet. Well, I'm excited for people to hear your story, your side of the story. So, Marc, let's kind of set the foundation. I'm always curious about, what led to you getting upping your game and getting involved. Give us the background, the history of what led to you being involved with J6.
Well, I was getting a haircut in Portland as the announcements for the inaugural speech was coming out for Donald Trump. And I was watching it on the news, actually at the barbershop there, who actually happened to be a member of the BLM, the Black Lives Matter. And she didn't know really who I was, but she was a friend of a friend who owned a business next door. And so, we would go and get haircuts there and give her business, and it was a good working relationship. So I felt, okay, I'll get my haircut. And so, yeah, it was interesting. It was coming on the news there in the salon or the barbershop, and she was looking up at that, and I said, yeah, that's going to be epic. And she ended up being a witness for the feds against me, when they were trying to build a narrative that I was planning an insurrection.
Oh, no.
And, it was nothing like that. I just knew that it would be big because Donald Trump was involved, and that there was a lot of debate whether or not the elections were there was integrity in the elections or not. And so I knew that, it was an opportunity not only to hear the president speak, but to also witness the situation and what was going to, what would transpire, considering there had been information made known to us, as we go on to social media, that Antifa would be there and disguised as Trump supporters and this and that. So, it felt like we'd been through a lot of riots, doing somewhat security service for some of these other patriotic groups who were just trying to do a simple protest, and they were getting attacked by these people, these people then these organizations, rocks, bricks, feces and urine bottles, all kinds of things. And I just, had become accustomed to these things, and I was getting the idea that they were orchestrated pretty high level. And I suspected that there was government deeply involved in it, but I had no evidence of that, I had no proof of that at the time, and it was only a thought that was developing. So when I decided to go, the opportunity had just come to me. Actually, it seemed like I had the thought, and there it was. And some public funding became available, with the caveat to help other Washington Trump supporters and patriots get to the Capitol to be there to witness this event. And so I ended up yeah. Go ahead.
So, Marc, let's go back before we get into you going. I'm kind of curious, like, what was your involvement in politics before? You mentioned the Trump inaugural speech, right?
Yeah.
So that's 2017. So, yeah. Were you heavily involved in politics before? Tell us your history of where, what led you to getting involved at a deeper level.
Right. So, going to the inaugural speech was for the 2020 presidential race, the Donald Trump official record lost. And but before that, the previous election, I was following Donald Trump's campaign in 2016, and I had being in the Northwest, the Tea Party had, built up some momentum there, and I had been talking with them to find out, what is a good strategy, for geopolitics in Washington and Oregon, with the way these people that seem to not really be on our side, how do we reduce their geopolitical footprint? And so, had discussions with them on some of the things that they were doing within the Republican Party. Um, and all the meanwhile, I was kind of a rising member in the Proud Boys as we were going to these rally/riots and engaging with Antifa in a primarily defensive position. There's, of course, some situations where we might have been a little offensive, but that was only a preemptive defense, in the sense that they have intentions that are very malevolent, and they're very inundated here with the John Brown Gun Club in the Northwest, started by John Brown, who I think Kate Brown is his daughter or son or granddaughter, and then the Cascadia group with Bill Gates, who Obama and Bill Gates worked together to build this communist group called Cascadia. And so you had a lot of these proxies out in the Northwest, running interference and basically jumping on using corporate money. In fact, I think it was Whole Foods. Whole Foods set up their headquarters in Portland and allowed Antifa and BLM to use that as their home base and their rally point during the Summer of Love. Okay. So
2020.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And so, so getting, in 2016, getting through, having the information as a member of the Proud Boys, and learning about Antifa tactics, and that they were kind of the brown shirts, of the Nazi Party in a sense, just kind of in a new way, right? They were just useful idiots in that regard.
Wow.
And yeah, and so.
How long were you involved in that prior? When did you get involved with the Proud Boys, and maybe give us a little bit more of like why you got involved with that?
Yeah, from about 2017, I think it was, when I really officially got into the Proud Boys. I had touched bases with them before at rallies and things like that, and with different patriot groups in the Northwest during different events. And I was building kind of a network of people, and finding out who was really serious and who was kind of just playing around, or taking an opportunity to be in the limelight. And so I ended up staying with the Proud Boys all the way up until just shortly after the January 6th 2021 incident, where we parted ways.
Okay.
And it was due to the January 6th, persecution, and the FBI's invasive, total Patriot Act, using Patriot Act and whatever else they could use to try to, investigate not only myself and other members, but also all of their contacts at the same time too. So they did a lot of their discovery with the help of these tech companies.
Wow. So,
Yep.
and I want to talk about Proud Boys just a little bit more, because I think the media has portrayed the Proud Boys as a radical, bad group, basically. And I'm curious. I've not, really investigated this myself. I have ideas and some assumptions, but tell us what what is the Proud Boys? What do they, what invoked you to become part of it?
Yeah. Well, I had been in sales for about 11 years, coming out of field service engineering through oil and gas, and so I felt like I felt like I could add some value as somebody who has kind of carved my own career in industry and in the different sectors, and my understanding of equipment and building businesses and things like that. I felt like I could add that as a value to the club, being uh, on their homepage, their tenets was to glorify the housewife and or venerate the housewife and glorify entrepreneurship. So I felt like this is kind of my group, because a lot of these guys are in the millennial category, and I feel like has not been exposed to some of the higher knowledge of how to run business, finance, and things like that. And there's definitely brilliant guys in the organization and people that are very good at what they do. But I felt like that it was just an element that we could add to actually live up to the tenets of Proud Boys.
Interesting, interesting. And so that's what drew you into it. I love that. I didn't know that that was some of their tenants. And I think that's, that's a high calling, high order. So, so you got involved with them. That led you to being, involved in seeing some of these, like you said, the riots. I remember going to a rally here in Spokane where it was during, all the shutdowns, and we had I can't remember, like a freedom of speech rally or something, where we walked down through the streets of Spokane. And I remember there being Proud Boys there on purpose to protect the people.
Yeah,
And it was really, really nice knowing they were there to protect us as we, uh, uh, did our constitutional duty and utilized our freedom of speech to protest the shutdowns.
yeah. No, it's. I was proud. I was proud to be a part of the organization, and I felt like I was prepared for the bad rap, being a member, and especially a targeted member, with the infiltration of FBI into some of the aspects of the organization, and in through the opposition. And that's kind of when I started thinking, well, if there's informants or FBI members that are embedded in the Proud Boys, then there's probably that much and more that's directing the BLM and Antifa riots. So you got to remember, these guys are Hollywood stagehands, and that's where you get all the media clips and sound bites that's support their ridiculous narrative. Okay, they
Wow.
manipulate the public, and they know how to do it because they are very steeped in high levels of psychology of groups um, and different herd mentality type aspects.
So
So
let's break
yeah.
that down a little bit, Mark, because you just
Hmm.
said a whole bunch right there that I'm not
Yeah,
sure everybody caught. So you're saying that they're hired stagehands,
yeah.
and that they like what they're doing by so explain that. So I'm thinking that you experienced this firsthand. So will
Yep,
you explain that just a little bit more?
absolutely. um, there is uh, more than enough documentation that explicitly shows that the CIA is involved with Hollywood and in media, and also the FBI, in trying to control narratives and project a particular narrative that they want to push, a corporate propaganda script. Okay, and so we've seen this in governments all over the world. Romans did it all the way down to Britain and everybody else. Okay, because they've got to manipulate the public to maintain control, and that's what they've been doing. And these ABC agencies are heavily involved. In fact, it was I forget his name, but he was the lead singer from Blink 182, He went on a podcast. I want to say it was a Joe Rogan show when he first started. Maybe it's somebody like that. But he said that he felt that the narratives that the CIA was putting together about trying to explain away UFOs and extraterrestrial activity, these type of things, that they were poor narrative writers. They were bad writers, and they need better writers. So he actually formed a company and reached out to the CIA, I believe it was, or the DoD, to offer his services. Okay, so that's how, yeah, that those are the kind of people that get into this, and and are they're knowing in what they're doing. They're manipulating narratives. Okay, and it's all to have political control and to keep people more as cohesive under their control than finding out and being free thinkers.
And so
Okay.
you witnessed this in your dealings as a Proud Boy when you were in those defense positions. You
Yep.
saw that firsthand.
Yes. There were. I started to see, as I was looking and becoming more aware, I started to see situations in the latter part of the time where I would attend some of these these riot rally type places in Portland and Olympia, Seattle, and I started noticing that they were staging, and I believe they call them wet boxes, right? And they put certain staged items that they're going to use, props. So you can consider them props, okay? Because remember, they're stagehands, and they're just like a film crew, okay? And the
And
media is
and
part
that
of it.
implies that they're also paid. So do you believe that did you have evidence of them being paid?
I've heard a lot of evidence of them being paid. I've seen ads in the paper and online through Indeed and LinkedIn and Facebook, advertising for character actors. And then there is a small description of these political things. And if you look on there, who's doing all that stuff, it's these NGOs, and they're dividing it out so that it looks like it isn't
Just one.
coordinated.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wow. And so
But I'll tell you, the main people that was guiding and controlling these university kids in these BLM and Antifa riots were members of the FBI. I took a job as Lyft during the Summer of Love, and I spoke to many rioters, people protesting and things like that. 80% of my rides associated with that time and those people, they were being fed information. And when I used the Socratic method to work through their angles and to work through the subjects, without revealing who I was, 80% of them said, "You should take Ted Wheeler's place. We hate that guy." But they liked what I was saying because I was talking about their student debt and how do they like their education when they come out? Are these institutions serving them to be ready for the future? When you have corporations having their own universities or their own training programs to take four-year college students out because they're 4 years behind. Basically, when they're going into these universities, they're getting information. By the time they're out, it's already old news, especially in the tech industry.
yeah. Yeah.
And so
Wow.
when they get into these industries, they go back into basically a school environment, that same sort of echo chamber bubble, and then they get trained in the position, or for the position that they're applying for. So they don't even get to pay back their debt until into their employment. That a lot of these companies will put them on a 2-year contract for employment to try them out before they're considered really permanent.
So you were basically asking these people questions and kind of trying to, find out more information as they were writing in your lift. And this is where you gathered a lot of this information evidence that yes, they were being organized and paid for as well.
So yes, there's some that were getting paid. Many of them were getting paid. Um, but there were some that were following along because they were spoon fed the information that this is what they needed to do and this is how to do it, and so they're impressionable and they trust the people that are in their system. You know, these were professors, these were admin in the colleges. These, you know what I mean? These are people that are supposed to be for their well being, and they were leading them down a path of destruction.
Wow. So, and you use the word staged. You experience and saw this where you go to these events, and here are these like staged props, as you said,
Yep.
and so it wasn't by accident. And what kind of things did you see there?
I saw a scene where they had staged a march. It was Proud Boys and other patriot groups that had gathered to march, and then there was, you know, the opposition gathered to march, and then the fire department with the law enforcement set up a water cannon over the bridge, and then they were filming all of this, making it look like it was not peaceful and that they were having to quell the uprising of these people, but they were all just pretty much standing there with minute little pockets where they could get, you know, some action or some pieces or bites to put into that narrative to make it so.
To make it look like
But it
it
was
was.
all controlled.
Yeah, fascinating. So let's get back to January 6th. So that was kind of leading up to that. You had experienced this, you had, seen it with your own eyes, been privy, to these type of experiences. So all of that kind of led to you going. I mean, were there other factors that led to you wanting to participate and be
Yeah.
there?
Well, there's a lot of people that are in the heartland of this country who are good old American patriots, doing the hard work and living a good life and maintaining maintaining discipline. When they get agitated by the political scene and they go to, like Stop the Steal rallies, the rally that happened, there is a naivety that's natural there on what's actually going on. Okay, they think they're there to do the protest. They're not. They're not really. They're not really experienced like we are on the left coast with the levels of organization between the corporations and NGOs and Antifa, BLM, John Brown Gun Club, Cascadia, all those people. Okay, and they're all kind of doing the same thing in within these organizations.
And real quick, because you've mentioned this a couple times now, John Brown Club, or John Brown Gun Club, I am not familiar. And I'm really not familiar with Cascadia as well. So will you tell people a little bit more about those organizations?
Yeah, so they're like Hamas. Okay, you've got the Ayatollahs that are controlling Iran and things like that. They're proxies. They're NGOs. Okay, well that's the same thing. Microsoft, Bill Gates, Obama, and his friends. And remember that Obama had a lot of support from the Waltons and um, the people that own Costco. Okay, Hillary's book had a book signing in Costco, which I thought was cheesy, and so that's what's pushing. That was what was pushing their agenda because really nobody wanted to hear their garbage, and so
Right.
they had to create these groups in order to follow their narratives and to act them out. Okay, and so the John Brown Gun Club are the serious guys. Those are serious threats with Bolshevik communist agendas. And Cascadia, I don't know if they're quite to that level, but they're definitely certainly in that genre, in that realm.
Gotcha. So because you had been experiencing this and saw all this level of organization in these local Pacific Northwest rallies, whether it was your rally, a patriot rally, and you saw people coming in opposition or vice versa, you were attending an opposition rally, but you saw this level of organization. So as you're seeing this event coming and unfolding, you are comprehending that there's going to be this huge level of organization, aka bad actors, is
Yeah.
what I'm am I getting that, Mark?
Yeah, it was being revealed as I was going along and noticing, the tactics, getting intel from actual Antifa groups, and kind of infiltrating them on different social media platforms. Uh, there was definitely some things that were not innocent in the sense or genuine about their message.
So in seeing all that kind of play out prior, you felt that, okay, with the understanding that you had, that compelled you that you needed to be there. Am I gathering that correctly?
Yeah, I felt like that eventually I'd be a witness to some of the details within the protest that were kind of unusual anomalies or things that were suspicious. Um, I also went there with the knowledge and knowing that people get hurt if Antifa is involved. In these situations, and I felt like it was going to be turned up to 10 in a way because of because of 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 the stage. It's the nation's biggest stage, and actually, it goes into worldwide politics, international politics. So it's
Right.
bigger than our country. It's definitely one of the biggest stages, and so that's kind of my background with it. I knew that there was going to be people there that were just naive about it, that were just coming there to protest, and if they get caught up in it, then there's some people, well-meaning people, that were really going to get hurt. And I felt like I could witness to that if that was, intentional, and also help, people get out of certain situations if they're nearby. But the primary reason was really um, to kind of know the scene and and try to mitigate whatever I could.
Wow.
Um,
So
yeah.
you went with the
Hmm.
knowledge that something could go down not good, and you were somewhat expecting that, and not
Well,
necessarily from the patriot people, but from the bad
right,
actor.
right, and so yeah, so that's the thing. Um, the expectation was kind of contingent on the security of DC, and I felt like, well, that's the Capitol, and President Trump's going to be there, and the Capitol Police are on President Trump's side, right? Well, that turned out to not be the case so much, right? We've heard some of the testimonies from Ivan Ranklin and Tucker Carlson about some of what was going on there with these
Tell
agents.
people, because not everybody knows. Tell people what you know on that.
Yeah, so there were, like I said, stagehands, film crews that were populated by FBI members and peoples within the government. Okay, and this is where Nancy Pelosi's daughter is stated to have run this show and be a director of it. Okay,
Right.
she was in film, she directed it. Okay, so she was kind of building that narrative. They controlled that whole thing, and I do believe that a lot of patriots, within the Proud Boys and everything else, kind of knew that some of this stuff would happen, in a sense that there was a chance that we'd have some entrapment issues or something that would, be a counterattack. But I personally had never really thought that the government would attack first, directly. I thought they would use maybe Antifa members or whatever to go through and do things. And there were actual some Antifa members with knives that were going around, walking around covertly stabbing people, throwing water bottles and things at Capitol Police to try to gin up the riot.
Wow.
And meanwhile, yeah, they were dressed as Trump supporters. So they were purposely infiltrating to try to make it look for the media that it was Trump supporters causing the issues.
Yeah. So, and I want to get into the details of exactly what you saw and exactly what you experienced, maybe even a little bit of a timeline. But first, you touched on the whole security issue, and I just want to ask you about that. What kind of, you were expecting there'd be security there at the Capitol Police. What was there, what wasn't there? I mean, I've heard that Nancy Pelosi shot down the request by Donald Trump to have the National
Yes.
Guard there. Explain what you have found out, what you know.
Yeah, so those decisions between Nancy Pelosi coordinating with the Capitol Police chief at the time and some of the people internal, there's a group of people that are part of the executive administration that are behind the scenes. Those are the underpinnings of government that Elizabeth Warren mentioned in her speech, that she was afraid were going to, be defunded. Okay, and so they were in the backgrounds orchestrating all this thing. And just think of watching a movie, all the work from the actors and the film crew, especially. There are stunt men, there are props. Okay, the pickup truck with the I forget if it was a hangman's noose or a guillotine. I think it was a hangman's noose or something like that. That famous first picture of what the Trump rally was all about, hanging Pence and Congress members. Okay, that had been staged the day before by these ABC agencies. Okay, that was their props. It belonged to no Trump supporters, and conveniently, all of that has not been talked about. And that's kind of the same way with the planted shoebox bombs at the RNC and DNC. Okay, there was a lot of no information coming out of the FBI on these things, and you would think because it affected both political parties that they would be all over it and exposing a bunch of things. But why didn't they ever say anything? And now, years later, they're forced to say a few things about it, and there's still pushback within the organization.
Yeah, for sure.
If you have good intentions, you're not going to do it in secret.
Right. So let's talk more about what your experience was then. Is there anything else that you want to get into leading up to that day, or do you want to just describe what you experienced that day?
Well, it was a relatively short period of time when I, said that I was getting my haircut and I was, it was going to be epic and all this stuff. And then, it came to my purview to be able to get this public money that was offered to me to help, get people to the rally and help support Trump. And it was all to help support one of the best presidents, probably the best president we've ever had in this nation, in this country.
And I'm assuming, so I want you to clarify here. I'm assuming like you're going to help it be peaceful. That's like, to help maybe protect the integrity of a free speech event and to ensure that it's peaceful. Is that right, Mark? Because I think a lot of people, you even alluded to this earlier, that the FBI tried to say that you were, going with a nefarious intent. But tell us what your intent was. I think that's very important.
Yeah, my intent, like I said, was to be a witness and to support Trump in that witness, and hopefully help people that I assumed would probably get injured in this thing. There was well over 1 million people that the media completely snubbed and said a few thousand here or this or that, a couple thousand. I mean, they were really, really lowballing everything and denying what the facts were. Through our organizations, they used a software to determine crowd size per capita. So, and so you have inch squares represent, let's say, 100 people or 500 people or 1,000 people. And that's how we came up with the actual number, because it went all the way back from the Capitol over to the monument. It was everywhere. And so that's what it was. But of course, they control the media. So there's no word of that. So it became what they were saying it was. That was the reality for everybody else.
Right. So,
okay.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of people.
Yeah.
And there was, and the fact that there are so many people, you just know that there's possibility for emergencies, people from, I don't know, getting dehydrated and fainting, to low blood sugar, to anything. But my point is if I saw any of that stuff in my sphere, that I'd be able to catch that and get that person to help.
Right.
Not only that, but as I was there, I was seeing some of the organization, especially after the Capitol Police completed the first strike. Okay, before anybody did anything, the Capitol Police fired on that crowd, and they were firing CS gas and using tactics for crowd control that are illegal. They are not lawful to use, and they used them anyway.
So, Mark, explain to people, clarify this. You witnessed this. You witnessed the Capitol Police firing unprovoked on the people. Is
Absolutely.
That okay.
Yep. I witnessed a canister of CS gas being shot directly at an elderly couple. I have friends, we've discussed it, that were there, and they had witnessed different things that were similar to that. We have patriots with, the guy, I forget his name, but he's pretty well known, had been hit by a rubber bullet that went through his cheek.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah. And so those are the type of actions that they were doing. They're not supposed to aim those things at the people. The canisters of gas supposed to go overhead, and then it drifts down. So there was definitely some malicious intent in what they were trying to disguise as standard crowd control or standard protocol, and a little bit of panic for being understaffed. They created that position of being understaffed to further validate their narrative. And that's why Nancy Pelosi denied the 10,000 National Guard members who Trump offered to put there for security reasons. Okay.
Right. Wow.
And so all of that leads to this narrative built up that is showing you this Hollywood production level event as a total insurrection. I mean, even to this day, I was at the Spokane rally on the 5th, and there was a guy that knew I was a J6er and stuff like that, and he said, "Oh, you're an insurrectionist. Hey, this guy's an insurrectionist." And so you see that people are still gaslit about this issue. Yeah. They're very gaslit about this issue, but they're gaslit based on spoon-fed information disseminated to them through the corporate medias, okay,
right.
and through their proxies. Yeah,
very
and I'll tell you that also in social media, if you come across an account spewing this type of propaganda in the same resonance, it's possible and likely that it's a DHS account that they're using the Department of Homeland Security. Okay, and I'll give you proof. I'll give you the receipts. Marcy Wheeler on Twitter, before Elon Musk bought it, was a DHS account, and I found that out during the time I was on house arrest. I did have police contact. I think it was like a speeding ticket they were trying to give me, and I just said I don't contract with you, and I know the law well enough to know that they're supposed to be enforcing policies that really only apply to the government. So government workers and government cars. Okay. And so because they're using commerce law and the public is in a different jurisdiction. That's why it's said, that's why it's, it's told to the people that it's we, the people, with the power to change government.
So you were saying that this Marcy Wheeler account,
Yeah.
which I'm not familiar who this is, was a DHS account.
Yeah. So, and part of that is because of the stop, it got entered into the Spokane police station, and there was a snitch in there who unlawfully made that stop, and the information that the police had made that public by sending it to DHS, and DHS disseminating it through the social media platform.
Whoa. Wow.
Yep. So this is how organized it is. It looks like it's coming from a grassroots or a natural, place that it's not organized, but it's heavily organized through a lot of the corporations, and certainly all the major media and social media platforms.
Gotcha. So, Mark, I'm curious about what happened, what you experienced that day, what you saw, what you experienced, and then what were you charged for? So can you lay out kind of what you experienced or saw or, did or didn't do on that day for people? And then I want to talk about what you were charged with.
Okay. Yeah. So, while I was there, I did witness how the Capitol Police were using a bike rack to try and push people back, causing a situation in a crowd called kettling. And they're basically trying to cut them off on the flanks and force them into a funnel. And that is to assist them in managing the crowd. Okay, it's like herding sheep. And just think of these guys on the flanks as sheepdogs, border collies that are nipping and yipping on the outside and around, trying to force the crowd to go and do what they want. Okay, and it makes a very dangerous situation, because you have elderly people that were there, that are they believe that their country is become under attack with these fraudulent or seemingly fraudulent elections. And so they were there to ensure that Congress was to do their job and stop that steal. And we find out later that over 50 complaints were filed with Congress stating that there was questions about the election integrity, and they were wholly ignored, not even brought up in committee.
Right.
And they are supposed to, they're mandated to answer those things and to rectify it for the integrity of the elections.
Yes.
Okay. And so anyway, you have these people that, may not have the experience of these riots and how bad it is on these very extreme areas on the coast, who were caught in the middle of this, just like they are in Middle America. You got Middle America, and you got the left and the right coast closing in on them with all of their corporate policies, right? And give your dues and reparations to the crown or to the company. So that's what they do, and so you have these people that don't have any idea of that stuff, or maybe a small idea of that stuff, that were there, wholly innocent and definitely not capable of being violent or or having the strength to sustain a siege against the Capitol. And we were finding that they were getting targeted by these Capitol Police. There was an instance where there was a couple that were in their 80s that they had been standing there on the where the stairs and the stanchions were, and they were hit directly with a can of CS gas. The wife was the woman, and she had blood coming down her face. And about just shortly after that, you have the bike rack and the cops coming to form a line, kettling the people. They were getting trampled on the back end, or about to get trampled on the back end. And so the only thing that I could think of to give them time, or give people time in general, to get out or to get to a safe place, was to push back on this assault, and try to. I wasn't going to stop it. I certainly wasn't going to stop it, but maybe I could draw the attention my way, and help people kind of escape the media frenzy on it, and the narratives. Turned out that I was definitely turned into that, or it turned into all the attention on me, because I'm, as well as maybe a handful of other people, probably the most slandered people in the media in this whole the whole narrative. I mean, we have Washington Post, we have Seattle Times, we have Toledo Blade, we have I think it was a OPB, and all these smaller organizations that are under these bigger corporations. Because remember, our media is controlled by Big Six, right? So
And
any of these other media places,
explain what
so
that is.
these are big conglomerate corporations that have broken antitrust laws, but yet the government, they pay the government to look the other way. That's where you get your lobbyists. A lot of your lobbyists that have that have the money to pay these clowns are from corporations. They aren't from small businesses.
Right. So basically there's, 6 major corporations that own all the media, like most of the mainstream media.
Most all of the media. Now it's a different, it's a different game, because Patriots got in there, and we created independent media, and that is one of the saving graces of independent citizen journalism, for this country, is we got the truth of these things out, and we were able to rebut and annihilate the narratives piece by piece that the media was putting out.
Right. Like just doing like this, like we're the news now. Right. And that's
Yes, you are.
exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing, is to help share these stories, to give a platform to these stories that you will never hear from the mainstream media. And that's why I so appreciate you coming on, because this gives people an opportunity to hear a different perspective, your perspective of what happened, what actually happened, not the spun propaganda that happened, but what actually happened that day. So let's get back to what you experienced. So you created a distraction. You saw these people, this 80-year-old couple in jeopardy. The gal bleeding because she had gotten hit in the head with this canister, and because of the kettle effect that they were creating with the bike racks. So you did something, and tell us more.
Yeah. So just for the clarity and brevity, I witnessed the couple, just after the canister hit, the evidence of that, but that was after. So that was after my first few minutes of pushing on that bike rack. Okay, I pushed on the bike rack for a little bit, and then I felt like they were kind of holding, or the crowd was backing off and moving. They had a chance to move, and then I let go of that bike rack. I never touched an officer, never assaulted an officer. Bike rack is not a, it's not an officer. And I walked back to kind of survey what was going on behind me and see if I could find anybody that I had went with, or, you know, somebody that I, you know, had some sort of association with that I could talk to and see, you know, gather information on the dynamics of what was going on. And that's when I saw the elderly couple, and then I ran back to the front and went on that bike rack again. Okay.
So,
Because they were getting trampled.
Okay, because I'm envisioning.
It is complicated. Yeah.
Well, and you know, I appreciate it you clarifying for us. So I envision like they're squeezing the people with
Yep.
you know, bike rack to try to control, but then that's creating this chute of this potential trampling. And
based
so
on
you're
that,
like trying to give it just a little more space so people can safely get through. Is that
Yeah, exactly. And just to keep it so that people that are in the crowd aren't getting trampled before they realize, hey, you know, maybe we should back up away from this stuff and not get hit. You know what I mean? And so that first little section gave the first crowd that was up in front time to back up. And it actually revealed Ray Epps on there saying to go in the Capitol, saying to push on the bike rack, and it also revealed some of the player characters and the people taking money who were acting.
So tell everybody who Ray Epps is, just in case they don't know.
Yeah. Well, he's an elusive guy, but he was a gun runner out of Arizona, I believe, or Nevada, and is suspected of having ties with the CIA for gun running. CIA or FBI, one of the ABC agencies, as a CI, and they did admit that they did have assets there, and they refused to identify who they were. Ray Epps, I believe, in my opinion, was definitely one of them, because he was ginning up the crowd and putting the idea to invade the Capitol. We need to go inside the Capitol, from the night before at one of the hotels where a lot of patriots had booked rooms.
And did he ever get charged with anything?
Not that I know of.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. So there's a lot of things going on. And remember, he was on the FBI's wanted list for J6. And then I believe that when they realized that he was a CI, because, you know, these guys are such a big agency, they don't talk to each other. They don't share it. You know, information is shared slowly. You know, you might have one scenario in one agency before you get it to another agency, right? And you do have good people within these organizations that are slipping this out, you know, seemingly, you know, inconspicuously, right? So he was up for a little while on the most wanted for January 6th insurrection, and then he was promptly taken off. And then when questioned, the FBI derailed and maligned anybody asking the questions, and said it didn't exist and this and that. We're investigating. We're not going to talk about ongoing investigations. That's their biggest thing. They talk about ongoing investigations all the time. If you go and you watch the news and you see, you know, somebody from the common people, the lay people, who robs a bank or robs a convenience store, they have their name, address out the day of. So don't think for 1 minute that they need to investigate to be sure of the identity of people. They've got facial recognition, they've got DNA samples, they've got everything under the sun to put this narrative together, and they can do it quickly.
Right.
They can do it quickly. This idea that it takes a long time to put these cases together, it can if there's a lot of cases and you're bogged down trying to keep things sorted and get teams together and organize all that. That's true. But in general, violations of law are usually pretty clear, and you follow the due process prescription for putting cases together. You gather evidence and then the witnesses to corroborate the evidence before you can make these claims. And
Right.
that
So
has
like,
not been the case in the FBI or any of the law enforcement agencies. Actually, if you want to be truthful, sheriffs and police, they all do the same thing at times. They
wow.
can do. And
So
so, yeah.
yeah, back to this day then. So
Yep.
you're helping try to create a little space to help people keep, safe.
Yep.
And then what happens after that?
Yeah. And so, so I go back after I see the elderly couple trying to get out from being trampled. I see other patriots starting to help them, so I leave them and go back. I figure I can maybe buy some more time, and then uh, after that, I let go of the bike rack again and started walking back when there was a break, like it wasn't even a breakthrough. It was the Capitol Police just receded and consented and um, allowed people to come in.
So kind of like the bike racks just opened up kind of thing?
Yeah, so like they backed up the bike rack, they backed up all. Now that they got their media sound bites, the operation goes to the next stage. And the next stage was to get Trump supporters inside the Capitol to say that we overrun it. But we have video of Capitol Police removing barriers, waving people in, and also shaking hands of people at the door and happily offering them, showing them the way inside. Okay, that is official permission.
Yeah. So were you one of those that went in?
I did. I was not at the front, but slightly behind the front, because the front, really, there was some provocateurs and actors that were there, and I didn't want to really get into that group that much. I wanted to see what was going on kind of behind all of that and try to look at the picture for what it is. So I try to see that further back, that macro view of the situation to see how the whole thing was orchestrated. Because remember, these are professional um, crowd manipulators.
Yeah. And are you in the very front of the Capitol uh, during this? Is
Right.
that where?
Yeah, where
Okay.
they had where they had the scaffolding.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I was there where there was the scaffolding and up the stairs and things like that. And at the door when they got there, um, there was a moment where some people in the front were just chanting, "Let us in, let us in, let us in." And of course, some of those are character actors that are provoking people. And at that point, you get that herd mentality. There's a lot of people that were at Antifa rallies and BLM rallies who fell for the same thing. They believed in some of these progressive ideologies because they were trained to believe it in school, and so it resonated with them. And then when they get there, they saw some of the violence that was happening and some of the things that that were going on. They didn't want to be a part of it as much. Okay, or they got dragged into it because everybody else was doing it. It is
Right.
really a herd mentality when you're in that moment, and you're only as smart as the dumbest denominator in a crowd.
So people are chanting, "Let us in." That's where, and you witnessed that.
Yep.
And then
Yeah.
what happened?
And then the doors swung open. They swung open. That's when the Capitol Police were there at the door, shaking hands, allowing people in. And they have staged areas where they're making it dramatic, like, "Oh, they've attacked and they've done this and blah blah blah, and they're coming in. We've got a breach. We've got a breach." I mean, it reminds me. You know what it reminds me of? You know what it reminds me of when you watch a soccer game and the guy doesn't even come close to kicking the other player with the ball, but then he takes a dive anyway, to try to get a yellow card. I
Yeah.
mean, you see this all the time. Oh, they act and they play up these injuries that don't exist to try to get the referees to throw a red or yellow card.
Yep.
I mean, that's why a lot of Americans, think soccer's kind of a joke.
So when you walked in, what did you experience? Were the police there standing by the door, just standing there? What did you see?
Some of them were just standing there. Some of them were moving with cameras, and
The
and
police?
Yeah, some police and some people in suits that were part of the Capitol administration, I guess, or security, were there, and there was cameras, and there was these character actors, and they were all playing out this thing like that there was this insurrection. I walked in unabated. I walked in, no
You
resistance.
didn't. You okay? Yeah, you didn't
I
push
went
your way
into the
in.
I went into the rotunda. I looked around. I felt proud to be an American, looking at all the history of our country, being in the birthplace of our nation. It was very humbling, and I felt I'm very proud to be an American, being there, and so I basically just walked around in awe at not only the opulence but the history of it all.
Your
You
first
know,
time there, I'm
my
guessing.
first time there, I'd never been to the Capitol before. I'd never been to DC. So I was looking at the paintings. I was looking at the statues. I fist bumped, one of my fellow Proud Boys, Ethan Nordine, and then then I just split up and I started walking around. I was just looking, and all I did was I went to places where there was nobody telling me not to. And the only doors I ever opened myself was into the main area, the chamber, to take a selfie on the second level down at the chamber. And I have that selfie still, actually.
And so there was
Yeah.
nobody blocking you from doing that. There was nobody saying you couldn't go in there. It wasn't like you barged in there, broke in there. I mean, it's the public viewing area, right? That second
Yep.
level.
Yep. It is a
Interesting.
public, yeah, it is a public viewing area, and they lied and said that was all restricted and closed off.
Hmm.
Which
I'm
maybe,
assuming there. I've never not been there, but I know what
yeah,
it's like at our Capitol at
yep,
Olympia. Is that second level is for the
yep,
public to come in
yep,
and view the proceedings.
yep. And to be clear, they pulled the permits for Stop the Steal and all the other organizations who were organizing with Stop the Steal or in the same manner an hour before this all happened.
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah.
Like you're
So
gonna be.
remember this, we were all permitted to be there. That means that for months or weeks, at least, they knew we were going to be there.
Yeah. I mean, a million
So
people.
why didn't they have, why didn't they have the National Guard? Why didn't they have people if we were such a threat to democracy?
Right.
They wanted to use that as an opportunity for a photo shoot to add to their media narrative that we were, and further malign Americans, homegrown Americans.
And malign Trump and people that supported Trump. Yes.
That's right.
So you're walking around peacefully. You take the selfie on the second level, and then what?
Then I walked out. I was in there a total of maybe 15 minutes. I don't even know if I reached that. And then I just walked out, and I was done.
And then
like the people were walking through.
Like just
there was
peacefully
still
walked out and just went home. You went back to your hotel, or
no? I went walking around the area to try to find anybody I came there with or people that I recognized, to try to find out what the plan was to exit out of there. Did we have enough? Did we have enough experience? The Capitol Police at that point had stopped attacking the people to let them in and welcome them in as if they're Jekyll and Hyde, right? First they're attacking and then they're just happy to have everybody in.
So the police, they attacked more at the beginning and created this scene, and then they kind of just pulled back. Is that accurate? And then people went in, people came out, and it was just
and they flipped the switch. They flipped a switch like they had multiple personality, right? And they flipped a switch and welcomed people to come in. Go in, go in, go in. So they went from stay out, stay out, stay out to go in, go in, go in. So now it's a media production to specifically a Hollywood level to try to get these sound bites and these clips to make it look like Trump supporters or this or that. A lot of the violent people who were in Trump supporter paraphernalia or who looked like Trump supporters were actually either Antifa or, more prominently, FBI assets.
Yeah. Wow. So
I think the first window that was broken. I think the first window that was broken was done by a CIA asset.
Wow. So you pretty much experienced from, after that first situation that you're in, you pretty much experienced a peaceful event after that. I mean, you walked in, you observed like you were, on any other day, a visitor, and
Yep.
you walked out and you saw no more confrontations. You didn't see anything else out of the abnormal.
Correct. They got their sound bites and it was over. There was some stuff going on the other side at a different time frame, but I had not been there to witness it, so I don't talk about what happened on the other side.
Right.
Some of the same shenanigans were happening there too.
Okay. So then what happens? Talk to us about the aftermath and what happened to you, Mark.
Well, now that they've got the sound bites to build a narrative that Trump supporters and especially Proud Boys are insurrectionists, and really the term that they want to do, that they want to put on us, is domestic terrorists. And so some of us were in court called out by the prosecutor as sovereign citizens. A sovereign citizen, by international definition, is a domestic terrorist, and where you find that is in the law of nations that express the relationships between nations. And in that, it says that the will of the malcontent few cannot outweigh the will of the many. Okay, and the definitions of the few are those that are not in agreement in a social compact, and those who are. Okay, and so that's why you have representatives. They're representing your rights. You don't actually have constitutional rights.
Right. So let's go back to so what did you experience? So you came back, you flew back, what happened? I mean, was there no action for a while? I mean, obviously, yes, there's this narrative being built, but what transcended after that?
Well, after that, I ended up finding a fellow Proud Boy, and we walked around looking for other people, and honestly, probably at that point, probably looking for a beer, and just to decompress and talk about what we experienced, because we were all in different areas scattered throughout. And so, there was bound to be different news and maybe corroborating news of what we were seeing, and maybe a realization of what we were actually seeing through it, because it's all basically a puzzle that you're supposed to put together, to try to figure out what was really going on.
Right. Right. And so you reconnected with, people, acquaintances, friends, and then, just left town and
we left town. Yeah, we left town. I believe it was the day. I believe it was the day after, and some people had left that night and were stopped and detained, arrested at the airport. So we had gotten some of that information, and I said, I ain't taking my return, because I had a return flight through JFK there, and so we ended up renting a car, me and a couple other patriots that I went with, who were kind of relying on me to help them get back. And we went and drove all the way to Detroit.
That night?
The following day, I believe we started, or no, maybe it was that night. Maybe that was that night, to be honest with you. Trying to recall, because we stayed the night. I believe in Illinois, at another Patriot's house. So one of the guys that was, that was with me had a friend who lived there, and so basically he said, "Yeah, come on over." And we talked about the event, ordered some pizza, drank a couple beers, and had some laughs and had some eye-opening, discussions about what was going on. And then we got in the car and left for Detroit to fly out of Detroit.
Okay. So this is interesting to me. So you already, because of what you found out information that people had been stopped at the
Yeah.
airport,
Yep.
you already were like, wait a second, I'm not going to play
Yep.
this game, even though you had experienced, like, you didn't, I mean, it doesn't sound like you did anything illegal. It
No.
doesn't sound like you did anything violent. You, you pressed upon, you pushed back a little bit on the gates, and I don't know how much, right? I wasn't there. I'm sure there's probably some video evidence somewhere.
Oh yeah, there's lots of it. I was
Right?
getting pepper sprayed. I was getting pepper sprayed by the Capitol Police, and I got an attempted uppercut by the captain there, and
And you said you never laid a hand on.
never did.
Okay,
Never laid a hand on an officer.
so you had no reason. I mean, there was nothing that you did that should have been like, oh, I'm going to be in trouble, right? But yet when you found out this evidence that people were getting stopped, you're like, oh yeah, that could be me. They can target me.
And there was kind of a concern. There was a concern. I think that some people had felt like maybe it might be tough to get out of DC if they're going to go after people for going in or around the Capitol or something. At that point, since we knew it was staged, we kind of assumed that there's probably some stuff to come afterwards for some people. But I always assumed it was from people who were intentionally violent, who actually turned up to be a lot, character actors and FBI.
Wow. Yeah. So you guys, again, kind of went in this with the forethought of this could be a setup, and had the wherewithal to change your plans coming back. Instead of getting on an airplane, flying all the way back across country, you got a rental car. So
got a rent a car, and then we took a one-way ticket from Detroit.
Okay. So then what happens after you get back?
After I get back, well, it's kind of interesting. My mom had sold her house, was kind of forced to sell her house because of just the economy the way it was, and it was on one of the fourth most busiest intersections in Vancouver, Washington. So it was kind of right there in the middle of everything, and somebody came along, offered her a very good cash amount that was far more than what she paid for it. And so she went ahead and went the deal. And what happened is it got tied up at the bank. I believe it was Bank of America, and they wouldn't give her the money. They wouldn't give her the money for the house she bought. And so to this day, she still hasn't received that money.
So is this tied to you?
Well, this is tied. Well, I don't know, but the law enforcement at that time knew me as the good son in my family. My other two brothers, they had been more street savvy than I have. And so therefore, we're on the radar, I think, of the cops a little bit more, just general stuff. And so, I feel like, local law enforcement knew who I was already, and that it could have been a situation where they were going to make this situation where they were going to, get my mom to sell the house, because really it's a prime real estate area for commercial right there at the fourth largest intersection. And it was a residential house. So
I guess I'm trying to understand how this ties back to your story though.
Well, I was arrested at the storage unit with my mom, where I was putting away her things from the house and trying to get, her transitioned, when I was swatted by local sheriffs who easily were able to do the, to coordinate with the Seattle office FBI. Julia Dippold was the case agent on that, I believe, the one that was in control of that. She is terrible. She gave false testimony.
So how long after you got back did that happen?
That was about, January. I think I was. I think I was arrested. I think I was arrested there March 16th.
So
So
two
couple
months.
months. Yeah.
And did
And
you have any idea that they were going to arrest you? Or, I mean, I guess probably it started, had you heard through other sources that this was happening to people? Um,
yeah,
so,
hold on 1 second. I'm probably going to be some background noise. There's a train going by.
okay. All right. Yeah, this is pretty fascinating story. And I know we've got about an hour and 15 minutes, Mark, and I want to respect your time too. Hopefully you can still hear me, but
Yes.
I want to definitely get into what happened to you and before the pardon and what you've gone through. I want people to hear exactly what you and your family have experienced because of this, right?
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that we get through that and hear exactly the impact.
Yeah. So once I was arrested, I was swatted there. Um, there was no reading of rights or anything like that. Um, there was no warrant produced, nothing. And they took me into custody. They ransacked my mom's property, her purse, and all this stuff. Um, Actually, when they rolled up on us, I had just gotten into the car, and my mom was in the passenger seat. They rolled up on us and went on the bullhorn and told me to get out of the car with my hands up and do exactly as they say, or they would shoot.
Well,
And I
a
was like,
swatting. I was going to say
"What?"
use the word swatting, and swatting
Yeah,
is not a light term, and then we've been seeing
no,
this a lot in the media lately. This is a critical situation where people could get killed easily if there's any kind of
yeah.
misstep or misunderstanding. Correct, right?
They
And so
they threatened my life right there and then to get me to comply. That's coercion. Okay, and that's a violation of the Nuremberg Code.
so they pull up with the bullhorn and they tell you to get out, and then what happens?
Uh, so I mean, of course, I'm gonna have to do exactly as they say. Otherwise, I don't want my mom shot, and I don't think they would discriminate. At this point, now we've got an enemy combatant. The state has become an enemy of the people. Okay, and so I did exactly as they said, and was cuffed and thrown in the back of a squad car, a sheriff's car, and then hauled into the Clark County sheriff's, the Clark County jail.
And no, you had no rights read, nothing.
No, um, in fact, I tried my best to try to not agree to anything with them because they don't have a case. Okay, they're just making accusations that they can't back up. So they were using these false narratives, these movie clips of the Capitol, in order to push that narrative.
And they were doing this when they arrested you?
Doing, yeah.
They were
What do
using
you say?
this narrative. Using this narrative. They were using this narrative when they arrested
Oh
you?
yeah, it was directed by the FBI. I know it's the same thing.
Wow.
Absolutely. They were going to
Wow.
make it shock and awe and make sure that it was this dramatic thing, and it accomplishes two things. First, it shows as a warning to every other patriot not to associate and not to gather and not to plan and not to network ways to regain more freedom. Okay? That's the number one, because we saw it afterwards. I got disavowed from the Proud Boys. They didn't want to have anything to do with me at that point. All of my other political, affiliations, were scared because of what the FBI was investigating, how the FBI was investigating everybody through social media and through electronic footprint. They don't want to be tied to that and be under investigation as well. So I lost everything at that point. My entire network, even a lot of my family was lowbrowing me for being at the Capitol that day. and a lot of people that are on the right in the groups as well. There was a lot of people from, I don't know, different right leaning or conservative groups that were sitting there, um, you know, berating people for going into the Capitol and all this other nonsense.
We've seen that as well. And I've had John
Yeah.
Cameron on, John, and
Yep.
he said the same thing. And unfortunately that's because people have believed the propaganda. And that's why it's
Yeah.
so important for us to get stories like yours out there on what really happened, not what the media has been spinning it as. So you're arrested, then what happens, Mark?
Yeah. So then I'm arrested. I go through the Clark County jail. And then I get transported the next day by the FBI across state lines to Portland Justice Center to be processed. I get on house arrest there. They coerce me to sign an agreement to be on house arrest with a GPS tracking monitor. And how they did that was, if you don't comply with them giving them information about yourself or agreeing to their processes, then what they'll do is they'll put you in what they call a cold cell or a hard cell. Hard cell. And it is cold. It's 65 degrees or lower. They can lower the temperature down to 40 if they want to. And they will deny you blankets and clothing. And you got to sit there on concrete, leaching out your body heat as you're sitting there. So you don't last too long. I know a couple of people in this world that have done it, have done it successfully, but it was very difficult for me physically and mentally to do that. I already have, some hip issues, medically. And
so they coerced you with threatening that for you.
Absolutely. And denial of due process. If they can't get you into their contract at the jail, if you can last 72 hours without giving them any information, they have to release you.
Yeah.
Because that's where a government under your consent comes into play. You consent to their authority.
So you consented to avoid this extreme situation.
I was coerced.
Yeah.
And the consent was forced, right? It's called forced association.
Okay. And then you were on house arrest.
And then I was on, and then I went through the justice system. I was there another night or two. And then my court hearing came up where I got placed on house arrest. And then from there, I was under strict guideline and the location was at my brother's apartment in Northeast Portland. Okay. And I was restricted from going in a certain radius of the business where I got my hair cut because she was a witness. So there was a restraining order.
Interesting. Yep. Interesting. Okay. So now then what happens? When is your hearing?
So there was multiple status hearings for 2 years. And part of the reason why it took them longer was because I wouldn't contract with them. I sent them judicial contracts stating my ability, like I will consent to contracting with you under these terms. And the judge refused to sign them, even though I sent them registered mail. So that's called felony mispersion. Okay. And the judge did this many times by denying motions and not offering rebuttal. This is due process in courts. If you have a motion and you've reasonably articulated this motion, this reasoning, this request, and submit it, they must reasonably articulate, if they're going to deny it, why they're denying it. Okay? And it has to be to your satisfaction, by the way, not to their satisfaction. Explain it. So it's to your satisfaction.
So the judge didn't do that, or
He did not do that. He denied the motions, and in a couple of different ones, change of venue, extensions. He denied some of those motions and offered no rebuttal.
okay, so that kind of kept pushing the process out, right?
Kept pushing the process out. I did submit shortly after getting the GPS monitor, and this is something for all you people that are forced to wear these stupid GPS monitors that have God knows what RF frequency invading your body. You're an electromagnetic system, so that's a big deal. And so, so I wrote an affidavit of torture that it was a torture tactic, and it complies with international law because it's an unknown effect of a device meant to control you. And it's called non-derogable, peremptory norms. Peremptory norms, if violated, is simply they made you uncomfortable.
Fascinating.
We're not supposed to be making each other uncomfortable in order to coerce. Okay? Think of it this way. You're sitting on the couch watching a football game. You're in the middle of a game, and all of a sudden you have to use the restroom or go get another slice of pizza or beer. You're uncomfortable. If you were comfortable, you would sit right there. But that uncomfortability compelled you to move. Right? Same thing. We don't like to move as Americans, especially politically, unless we're uncomfortable. Our economy certainly making us uncomfortable.
Right. Right. So let's get back to where you were at, and then what happened from there. So you know, there was these delays in the process for a couple of years, Mark, is that right?
Yeah, and part of them were due to my affidavits that I was putting together. I was using international law because I'm public and I was forced to contract with them, so therefore they have defective contracts.
And so when did your hearing actually then happen?
It happened well, the trial actually happened January 24th, I think it was, in 2023.
2023. So you went from March 6th when they first swatted you, 2020.
Yeah.
And then
the house arrest, and then of course before that we got to the trial, I had actually kind of given up, to be honest with you. It's kind of a cowardice thing to say, but I had given them the law. It was very clear, and it was very clear that they were going to roll over everything and run their defective contracts, and they don't give one hoot for the law. They don't care. And it really showed the willful ignorance of people that we are supposed to call experts and purveyors of the law.
Yeah.
A lot of them are actually have a lower IQ than you or me.
Wow. So what happens at the trial?
At the trial, well, let me preface this. After I had moved locations from Northeast Portland to Eastern Washington near Spokane area. And I did that for two reasons. One, court services wasn't out there, and they had to contract through DOC, actually, parole office. So that was automatically, they're out here on the east side. The east side is a little less inundated with people who are, running the communist agenda. And so some of these guys just want to collect their paycheck and go home, and they don't want to rock the boat on things, right? So I had less supervision ultimately than I would have in Portland, and less restriction because I worked late at a restaurant, and so I I wrote a motion to say, look, I need this curfew lifted so that I can get to the restaurant and stuff like that. Well, they lifted the excuse me, the whole thing. I didn't ask them to list I just asked them to extend it. And so from that point, I actually had more freedom to go around, do things, and actually crossed into Idaho on on this supervision, to get groceries, get gas, and DOC. I reported to DOC. Yeah, I'm going to do that, and they said no problem.
Yeah.
So nice. I had a lot of free reign out here, thanks to some people who maybe didn't even know, but they were good patriots for just not being aggressive and attacking.
Aggressive.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you go to this trial. I'm curious what
yeah.
The judge you had is is well known.
So they picked James Emanuel Boasberg. And it's fun.
Where have we heard that name lately?
Right. Yeah. And in relation to human trafficking, no less. Okay. And so I had Boasberg, and this is where we're gonna have to do another segment that tells you some of the background of why they attacked me so hard. Okay, and why I got certain people like Boasberg, certain people, from the FBI field office and the sheriff's office of Clark County to follow along in this charade. There was a reason. Okay, and we won't get into it now, but I think we should probably follow up and do something based on that, because that's going to get into more the wheelhouse of family education and some of the things you guys are doing at the Family Institute.
Okay. All right.
Yep, absolutely. So, but this all ties in, and I ended up for about 6 weeks. I ended up being a fugitive from my location in Spokane. I traveled through Idaho to Montana to get away from this and I was camping out in the wilderness, actually, in Skyline, down there in Gallatin County, for about 6 weeks. And then my truck was struck at 55 miles an hour by a driver who seemed drunk out in the middle of nowhere on a straight road. Very, very suspicious to me. Okay, and maybe next time I'll follow up and I'll tell you why that part was suspicious, because it all ties into this other stuff of some of the actions that they've taken that have nothing to do with January 6th, but yet they're using the vehicle of January 6th in order to try to handle me.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, it's
so you have
very
this
deep
trial. Yeah, and what do they charge you with? Because
they're charging me. They threw everything but the kitchen sink. They tried to charge me with witness tampering, which I don't even know where that comes from. And then they dropped that, and they settled on picketing, protesting, disrupting an event, entering and staying and remaining in a restricted area. And then the 1512, which was the obstruction of Congress, which was misapplied. Any law student in Law 101 could read that and know that that would not apply to this situation. It has everything to do with documents that have been subpoenaed by a court to a corporation that were then destroyed to say there's nothing to submit for the subpoena.
And would you say that was called 1512?
1512, yeah, the 1512A and 1512B. I was charged with the 1512B, which was that document, the obstruction of an official proceeding, which, okay, in the document destruction, right, which is the 1512A part, that causes an obstruction in a judicial proceeding, which is what that definition is for an official proceeding. The definition for Congress meeting to certify the election is ceremonial. Okay, so that's why that was fraud. That's why it was fraud on the people, and that's what has driven this destruction of patriots. 1,570 about. Not only that, but there was 1,000,000 plus, 1,000,005 plus patriots who were there, who are also J6ers, who were silenced and scared into silence because of these events.
Right.
And what happened to us?
Yeah, absolutely. So you spent from March 6th, 2020 until January 24th. You were basically on house arrest.
Yep.
January 24th, 2023. So that's almost 3 years on house arrest. And then you have this trial and these charges that were trumped up.
Yeah, I was flown to DC and I was kept in the DC gulag. They call it the DC gulag. It's the DC city jail, district jail. And I was kept there for months before. And then
before your trial, you were?
Yeah, before my trial.
So when did they do that?
October, sometime after or on October 7th.
Of 2022?
Yes, because the accident or on purpose accident that was created caused the highway patrol to come out, and it popped up the warrant when they ran my name.
Because you went camping and in Montana, and
yeah,
you didn't
I was a fugitive,
and you didn't notify your parole.
Right.
Okay, you're a fugitive.
Yep.
Jeez. So then they flew you to DC. So you're in the DC gulag.
Yep.
That has become infamous now, and I'm sure it was not very plush.
At first, before I even got to the area where the J6ers were being held in a unit together, I was in the intake area in the most dirtiest, disgusting, biohazard-ridden area of the jail that flooded when it rained, and mice would come up, and human biological materials were all over the walls. It was, and then of course they had the nerve to try to say for medical safety that they needed to swab me for COVID. I said, why don't you test for dysentery first? Just saying, if you care about health.
But that wouldn't help their narrative.
That wouldn't help their narrative. Yeah. But they just wanted to gather everybody's DNA is what they wanted.
Well, and get the numbers for COVID. Yes.
Yeah.
So you're there in DC, and how is your treatment before your trial?
There was a lot of neglect. There was purposeful harassment. In the gulag, being placed on the list for supposedly random cell searches, but yet you're getting these random cell searches like once every couple of weeks, once every month or so. It just doesn't add up. I mean, it's BS is what it is. These are all just
tactics to
bureaucratic. Yeah, they're bureaucratic nonsense is what they are.
Yeah. How was it? Did you get to I mean, was it helpful that you were there in DC with other J6ers? Were you able to, talk and
there was some time once I got in the pod. Yeah, there was time to talk. In fact, even at one point, out of boredom, really, Christopher Quaglin, who's also another famous J6er that was denied his medical meals for celiac disease at Northern Neck. He's got massive documentation of their purposeful, knowing intent, their culpability in torturing J6ers. And that's what it adds up to. It adds up to torture. And there's a lot of Nuremberg codes that these people have violated, and they will be brought to justice, very soon.
So those were the conditions that you were in until your hearing, and anything else that stands out during that time?
Yeah, so they were interfering, but they were also denying me the process of communications, legal communications. They were giving my backup attorney, because I went pro se, but they forced me to have a court appointed attorney who's a court officer. So there's inherent bias there, um, to basically use as backup, right? But really, what they're doing, yeah, they're just what they're really doing is they're buffering your arguments and your fight, and that's how they get a 98% conviction rate. Okay, is that your court appointed attorneys are working for the government, getting paid by the government based on your bid bond, which gets them the money.
My goodness. Wow.
Yes. So yeah, that's goes back to that human trafficking thing again. Okay,
Yeah.
so you're going to see that more and more when you start looking at these court cases, that there hasn't been a legitimate arrest since 1970 because of the lack of due process and defective contracts. Okay,
Yeah. So you
through the bid bond.
and you talked about 98%. Basically, to talk about that, because not everybody understands what that is.
Yeah, it's their conviction rate, their success of their convicting people.
And that's unheard of across.
That's unheard of,
like by far.
right? By far. And so you're getting into a kangaroo court. You know it.
Yeah. So this is indeed is this just this judge, or is it multiple judges within DC?
Oh, multiple judges. Yeah, absolutely. McFadden. Although I would say Judge McFadden, after looking over some of the evidence, he may have also been coerced to treat Jan 6ers in this way. I don't know. He was a Trump appointed judge. But there is maybe some evidence there that needs to be rooted out through fact finding.
Gotcha.
Because he had Christopher Quaglin had him, McFadden, as a judge, and Chris really really notified him and warned him of his intentional denial and refusal to adhere to due process and processes that are in a public court, because they're not really public courts; they're corporate courts. It's like arbitration.
Yeah, and I think we need to get into that in another conversation as well,
Yep.
Mark. I think that's a fascinating rabbit trail that people
It
need
is.
to understand.
It's so technical that you do have to spend time explaining it, and it's very hard to do and continue to maintain a narrative, the narrative that everybody will kind of grasp onto and understand, the meaning of the story.
Yeah.
But so all of this stuff is being done behind the scenes. We are getting tortured throughout this whole process, denied these due process rights, proper legal communication, denied, visitation by our, backup attorneys. Also, tampering with legal evidence, not delivering mail to us. There was bags and bags of mail that never got to us. We would get maybe 2 to 10 pieces of mail in a week.
Wow.
2 to 12 pieces of mail in a week.
And you never got them, or that's as much as got through. That's
as much as got through. Where the rest, I had books. Here's another fact. I ordered, through one of the Patriot groups. They were there to help facilitate getting us books and things and legal, materials that we can, try to use for our cases or publications. Epoch Times, for instance, get us subscriptions to Epoch Times, which I think is a fantastic newspaper.
It's
and
one of the best, unbiased, most unbiased. I think that there are, right? That there is.
The way you know is who, what, where, when, and how. That is the journalistic core
True.
of journalism.
Yeah.
Okay. Who, what, where, when, and how, and why.
Yeah.
And everything else outside of that is purely speculation or opinion
Yeah.
when they present it. That
Right.
includes Fox. Fox is a lot of speculation and BS too.
Oh yeah, they're part of it.
They're part of it.
So they prevented you from getting access to a lot of materials and while you're in the jail.
Yeah, prevented from getting access to a lot of materials. I actually got this confirmed by witnessing it in the hands of another inmate that was not a J6er, that in the mailroom, they would steal books and resell them.
So if books like were supposed to come to you or come to
They would not get to me and they would sell them.
and so somebody would confiscate them, take them in the mailroom, and wow, my
Yep,
goodness,
and sell them to other inmates.
wow. And so this is prior to your trial. What happens during your trial? You know, just give us a quick synopsis of what happens. What is the evidence they present?
Yeah.
Are you prevented from giving certain evidence? What happens?
Well, definitely there was a lot of restrictions, that denied me arguments that were valid arguments about the police involvement, about the coercion, about the entrapment of law enforcement, and that was going on at the Capitol. They purposefully made up excuses under the guise of national security to prevent this information from going through and to prevent certain camera footage from being presented. Okay, they wanted to control and narrow down the narrative to only so that only their narrative was visible to the public and was accepted by the public as an official statement.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm sure you all were sharing stories, or maybe I'm assuming you all are sharing stories. So you're seeing this happen to your other fellow J6ers that are imprisoned with you.
Yeah.
And so you kind of know what you're up against. And that had to be a pretty hopeless, frustrating experience, I would imagine.
Yeah. There was some fun to be had, when we were doing it, just because you'd make do with what you got, and we tell stories, and I wasn't part of it as far as a contestant or anything, but they did have a bodybuilding contest between J6ers where they,
you got to do something while you're in jail, right?
They used diluted coffee grounds for tanning oil and stuff, and paraded themselves like idiots over there, and it was fun. It was really funny, and I think it was Fellows, Brendan Fellows, another J6er who was doing the same, who was in as a contestant and wore a diaper, a soiled diaper while he was doing it. So it was hilarious. It was nothing but a satire show that we were doing just for our own amusement, and probably we were going a little crazy.
Yeah, probably for some sanity. Yeah, I can only imagine. I honestly I can't, because I have never been in that. So what happens after your trial?
After my trial, I'm there at the DC Gulag for a little while, maybe like a month or 2 months, and then I get shipped across the country to Lompoc, California, to serve out the sentence that I received, which was 5.5 years, which was primarily on the felony, which they had no grounds to charge me with anyway.
The felony of what?
It's 1512B.
So you'd already, again, from March 6th,
Yep.
You had been under house arrest, and then you were sent to DC in October of 2022, and then you're charged. What was the date you were charged?
I was charged. The trial was
January.
Oh, no, excuse me. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The trial was a little bit before 2024. It was actually in November, I believe, or December. December or November. It was near one of the holidays.
Is it
I think it was
November,
December.
December
I think it was November 23rd or 22nd
of 2024?
of 2023.
Oh, 2023. Okay. So
That was
then,
the, yeah. And the sentencing was January 24th.
okay, the sentencing. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Of
Sorry, it's hard to keep all of
2024.
the dates in my head.
Well, you've been through a lot these last few years, and
Yeah.
I mean, you've only been free what almost 3 months now. Is that right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you spent the rest of the time in. Did you spend the rest of the time in California?
Yeah. Well, I didn't even get to California for several weeks, maybe a couple of months, because I had been fighting my own case, and they were so PO'd at me that they put me in what has been coined as diesel therapy. And this
Yeah.
goes for any political prisoner, anybody that fights the law. If you fight the law and you have good grounds to defend yourself, and that is a threat to them, and they will put you on diesel therapy to try to derail your ability to investigate, derail your ability to draft your documents, and receive documents through the mail. Many times my documents were lost in the mail because I'd already been transferred somewhere else. I went to 12 different facilities before getting to Lompoc, and some of them multiple times.
My goodness. Okay, and explain to people what diesel therapy is.
So the diesel therapy is it just keep you in transit, and you stop off, and by you stopping off there, that facility is getting money. The next facility is getting money, and they're just drawing public funds. They're just wasting all this energy to justify drawing more public funds. And so the public, instead of paying for me to be in one prison, you've paid for me to be in 12.
And the transportation and
The transportation through Con Air, all of that
and
stuff. And those guys are contractors, so they aren't even government employees. They're contracting with the government as government employees.
plus it silos
That's not
you.
even supposed to be done.
Wow. Plus it
Yep.
silos you, as you're explaining. It keeps you from being
Absolutely.
able to get.
It drains your health. It drains your health. It puts you in compromising positions, being locked up and chained in uncomfortable positions. It is torture. What they use, what they call a black box. They use a black box that is cruel and unusual punishment. They just laughed, but they use that, and
A block box. I don't know.
a black box. It goes over the handcuffs to restrict your wrists even more, so you can't hardly eat. You can't bring water up to your mouth from water bottles that you're given on the plane without serious effort, and it causes redness and irritation around the wrists and bruising. This is all abuse. This is all torture.
Wow.
And sometimes people think, oh, torture. It's not like you were getting waterboarded, or it's not like you were getting your nails pulled out. Doesn't have to be that way. Torture is making somebody uncomfortable, okay, and using that uncomfortability to coerce them into compliance.
Yeah. Yeah. So you spent, how many months do you think you spent in diesel therapy? How long did it take for you to actually get to California?
I want to say 3 to 5 months. I don't know. It's kind of a blur. I mean, as far as the timeline goes, I went to so many places. The only way I could probably keep track of dates is if I could track down the people I replied to in letters that did get through.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were in California how long?
I was in California for well, here's my last stop in the diesel therapy was Victorville, California, which is a couple hours away from Lompoc. And they make a run to Victorville, I think twice a week. But why was I in Victorville for weeks? It's because of this diesel therapy to try to attack you and keep you busy and keep you from fighting your case. Okay. My attorney filed a grievance against Victorville for doing this and for keeping him from visitation.
Right. Because you're supposed to be, this happened after Trump pardoned the J6ers, and there were some that still weren't pardoned or weren't released, and
Yep.
we followed their stories. Is it Sean Baker or
Yeah.
Sean Brown? And
Jeremy Brown.
Jeremy Brown, thank you. And so he's supposed to be here, but he's not here, you know. And so people don't like, where is he? You know, so
Exactly.
that makes sense to me. Is
Well,
people can't. You're supposed to be somewhere. You're supposed to be in a
Yep.
certain place in California, but you're not there yet.
Yeah. Part of it is that, and part of it is that we are, as Donald Trump has stated many times at big rallies with a lot of people, J6ers are not just political prisoners. We are hostages being used to try to, as blue chips, to try to negotiate for their lives, because they know they have committed high crimes at the federal level and down into the local jurisdictions. And there's a whole nother section of that will get into the reasons for why that is. But that is a fact. And because we're hostage negotiating instruments, that is why you see the delay in Trump's mandate to free J6ers based on pardon. Okay.
Yeah.
How come none of that happened to any of Biden's appointee pardoned people?
Right. Yep.
Nobody was held hostage as held beyond the mandate. They all got out as soon as he signed it, and they received the paperwork.
Yeah, it's been crazy to watch. So you were you in California then when Trump pardoned?
Yeah, I was back at Victorville actually, because I had been at Lompoc for about 17 months. In that time, I came back to DC for another round of diesel therapy, and also they made it my schedule to get across the country so tight that it deprived me of sleep. I was sleep deprived and was not able to think as clear as I could have when I was there there to get the to go through the sentencing process after the Fisher case went through. I signed on to that so that I could get the 1512B off, and it won. So I was getting the felony off. Now the judge had to figure out how to keep me in for just as long a time on some silly misdemeanors.
Oh my goodness.
Which he did. He actually explained, and he actually admitted that he was so offended, and the court was so offended that he was justifying making the minimum or the maximum of 6 to 12 months for the misdemeanors, 3 times the maximum amounts.
And what were the misdemeanors?
Picketing, let's see, picketing, entering and remaining in a restricted building, parading. Yeah, these things, if you look, and there was no history, no precedence of any of this warranting jail time at all. These were slap on the wrist fines that the government got their fine and you went home.
So
because you have freedom of speech.
When you had this trial and you were successful, you signed on. It's the Fisher case. I just want to make sure I'm.
Yeah,
okay.
It was the Fisher case, and it was the wrongful application of applying the 1512B to January 6th situations.
And you were successful in that. So then that was removed from your sentencing. So then the judge resentences you and basically trumps up the other things, the misdemeanors.
Yeah.
To get you to stay in there longer.
Yep. And yes. And so we did that. And then on my way back, that's when they went back to slow rolling my attempt to get back. I remained in transit all the way until the pardon from that point. So from the Fisher case, resentencing.
Which was when? When was the
Fisher case? When was I out in DC?
I could look it up. I know it's
Boy,
probably hard because you were going through so much.
I don't. Yeah, I don't remember. I even get my years mixed up in some cases just because like so much has been crammed in there and fighting for my life on 3 federal indictments. They put me on 3 federal indictments.
Wow.
One is a known member of the Proud Boys, which I'm not a member anymore, and one on the Jack Smith case for insurrection, where I was named as one of the co-conspirators with Donald Trump, and also the case that the indictment against me as Marc Bru, or Marc Bru, because that's my corporate name.
Wow.
Yep.
Crazy. So so your resentences, and then they're going to take you, slow roll you back to California.
Right. And they slow rolled me back to California. I never made it back to Lompoc. I was considered in transit, IT, on my card. And I knew that they had no intention of sending me back, that they were going to keep me at Victorville in perpetual transit. They enacted further restrictions, operating in it as a higher level security, just to curb my ability to communicate on the outside and other people who were trying to fight their cases. Because remember, I couldn't do anything about my situation so much. So I started helping other inmates with theirs, getting medical claims filed, getting an ADA advocate to come out and take on cases and help with the legal process for people that were denied medical procedures, that were detrimental medical procedures. These were critical, and they were denied. And they were the explanation that they were always giving, the excuses that they were given, is that they're in transit. Once they get to their facility, then they can have these. That's horse crap. The BOP, the entire BOP and the entire law enforcement establishment has 3 conditions in which they have obligation to, so that they can be justified in handling the transportation and care and management of people. Care, custody, and control. And care is number 1 for a reason, because when you are picked up, it is mandated to them to treat you well, so that when you're out, you're in the same or better condition.
Yeah. Wow.
And you find out that, and if you look into it, you might do a deep dive on this too. I don't think the data has really been pulled. How many released prisoners have had heart attacks within 10 months or 12 months of being released?
Yeah.
The food, the treatment, the constant torture and maligning of rights, non-derogable human rights.
Yeah, but you didn't necessarily see other prisoners treated like you guys were, the J6ers, correct?
Not so much to the same degree, but yes, still, especially on the medical side, they didn't want to deal with it because they didn't want to spend the money on that, because what they're doing is they're collecting this money from the federal government for the care of these prisoners, and then they're redistributing it in the form of bonuses, $60,000 bonuses in some cases, or in other ways. So materials for food, they have a menu that looks really great, but you don't get butter when you at the end use. You don't get certain things at the end use. The cheese is even sold, so you don't get the cheese on the tacos that they say, oh, you're getting cheese and beef tacos. Well, I don't know what that is, but it ain't beef. I don't know what that stuff is, but that is not food. I actually sat there one day and looked at my plate and I said, would I even really feed this to my dog if I had to? And I said, absolutely not.
Wow. So,
absolutely.
Mark, we're going on 2 hours here, and
yeah.
your story is amazing and so complex, and I know there's so much to it. I want people to kind of have the opportunity to hear from you what happened when you got pardoned,
Yep.
and what it's been like for you these last almost 3 months now.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
After the pardon, it was the same thing, because the narrative is still that January Sixers are insurrectionists to the very general population who doesn't really get engaged politically. And so it's really dangerous for us to be out here. There was a J6er that was killed in Indiana, and one that I found out after that, after knowing that J6ers were getting shot, I found that out in Seattle, Washington. J6er, she was a 57-year-old doctor who was whistleblowing on the medical responses to COVID during that medical time, and she was an expert witness, remember? So people were looking to her as a professional in this, and she was credible. And so she was shot 5 times, I believe, in the back in October of 2024.
I remember hearing about this, but we certainly haven't heard very much about this.
Exactly. And I think it's kind of interesting, who ordered that hit, and was it really for being a January 6er, or was that a convenient reason? Because remember, so it goes back to this. Hitler used the media to put propaganda, government propaganda, to abase a political opposition. And therefore, once your political opposition is debased, that is a character assassination. You've assassinated their character politically. Now you can then go exterminate them physically without a public uprising.
Boy, will you say that again? Because that's exactly what is happening. If people don't understand, that is what the media is trying to do right now. That is exactly what the media is trying to do. Say that again, Mark.
The media, under direction of the federal government or direction of these corporations who are paying the federal government, have murdered, assassinated the character of the people involved in January 6th. Insurrectionists, domestic terrorists, sovereign citizens, in which I rebutted on all accounts that no, I'm not, quit murdering me. In the court, it's on the record. I told the prosecutor, objection, he's attempting to murder me.
No.
That is a communist tactic.
Yeah, and like you said, this was a Hitler tactic.
Yep.
That they used the media as
Yep.
propaganda.
Yep.
And that was, legalized, right?
If I can destroy your character, yep, then I can get people to ignore your plight.
Yep.
To ignore your voice. You're silenced.
And that is actually what we are seeing happening. I mean, we have so much division being sown intentionally.
Yep.
And so much demonization of a certain, people, right?
Yep.
Patriots, Trump supporters,
a political party.
A political party,
mm-hmm,
that we have people, being violent, destroying, keying cars, blowing up cars, flipping, yes, off kids in cars because they're in a car.
They, right? Created chaos.
It is, and this is exactly what is happening with our society. And yes, I'm a Republican. I've been very involved in the Republican Party, but we have, as a society, we have to understand what is being done intentionally to divide us so that we end up destroying each other.
Right. During the Spokane rally, I spent 90% of my time talking to our opposition and talking to them about policies that affect us here in Washington. And I got so much great response. They were like, why don't you come to our side and stop being with those, guys? And I was like, well, I'm not political. I'm apolitical. I've taken many matrices of, political bent, and on the XY axis, I'm about as center as you get. And so, that's why I had such a favorable time and was able to talk with a lot of rioters without malice and without receiving malice. And they were open about things. And I was actually able to change some people's minds and open them up to the bigger picture of geopolitics.
Nice.
Right.
Nice.
I did it there, and I did it at this rally. And they tried to get me to come to their side. Right. But yeah, so like I am deeply involved as an activist, not a politician, to try to correct the record, to bring people back to the center, because that's where the truth is. That's where the light is. And that's where we need to be. Yeah. If we can get back to our center, then we'll have a well-balanced budget, as that makes sense, as well as some conservative values that make sense for healthy families, and also some progressive values that make sense. I believe the climate control issue is a real issue, but it's not for the reasons they're saying. Chemtrails are a big one. That's another subject entirely, but that's where it's at. If you're getting sprayed with heavy metals and weaponized Lyme disease, that makes a sick society, that makes your gardens not grow, it dries up your land, it makes your trees burn from the inside out and rots them. Okay, that's why our forests are sick. They're not healthy. Has nothing to do with cow farts and motorists.
No, we had one of the candidates for the Commissioner of Public Lands on. I interviewed her last year, and she's always watched, always been like a biologist and in the forest and, camping and always out in nature. And she said, in 2014, the smoke color started to change. I think she said 2014, and it's a different color now. You should never used to be that color. And she talks about that. I mean, the land management has completely changed. There's the land management, but there's also, like you said, there's stuff being sprayed on us. And that is reality. I mean, there's tests being done, in Florida. They've taken these tests of this fog, and they're deciphering what actually, what are these things that are making, that are in this air that, so there's research that's being done. I know that's not common knowledge, and
no, it's not.
Media will not tell you this. And this is the other thing I think that's so important about your story, Mark, that people need to understand. People will be like, well, if this was true, we'd hear about it. We'd hear about it from the mainstream media. No, you won't. It is, but it doesn't make it any less true. In fact,
this is essential to understand for people that ascribe to socialism and communism. These are instruments that are used for totalitarianism because it centralizes the decision making and takes it out of the hands of the people, and the people the elected officials that the people elected. Because when you can do that, then you can drown out the accountability. The people have no idea how to get to it. There's a bunch of red tape in the middle, and you cannot get back control. And the control must be in the hands of the people in order to hold these officials accountable. And that's why I condemn sectors of the Republican Party and a lot of the Democrat Party and some of the Green Party. You've got these people that are in your avenues that are Zionists, that are maligning our integrity and our sovereignty as a country. Yeah. We haven't been a sovereign country.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you on some of that. I do. I've seen it firsthand. There's corruption in the Republican Party, and there's corruption. There's corruption everywhere, and there's corruption in the Democrat Party. We have to deal with that corruption. Now, I've chosen to work within the Republican Party to try to root that corruption out.
That doesn't make you a bad person. You're doing the right, you've got the right mind and the right thing, right?
Yeah.
But there are some people that Trump has lovingly coined Rhino Republicans, and they're more. The reason why is it's not that they want to be against the people; it's that they're more concerned about their title
And their
and
power.
their holdings, their assets, the money that they're getting, the money they're getting through the backdoor deals, all this stuff. They're more concerned about their wealth and title than they
Right.
are about you, the American people. And you got to get them out. That includes anybody from any party.
Yep. Yep. We got to get.
Learn to recognize it and
Yep.
get them the heck out, and don't follow the popular narratives that are being put out there about them.
Yep.
Do a deep
Absolutely.
dive and know who you're voting for.
Yep. And that's what we try to do as a Republican Party. We try to help people be, not low informed voters. We need
Yes.
people to, get in the game and really search these people out. Like you said, hold people accountable, hold our electeds accountable,
Yep.
hold the systems accountable. And it's going to take a little bit, but I believe we're on the right track. Mark, how do people
Yep.
follow you and follow, or get in touch with you? Are you
You
starting to
can,
get
yeah.
more? Are you also starting to get more requests for interviews? I'm kind of curious about that too. I mean, I so appreciate
It's
you
kind of
coming
hit
on.
or miss because I don't get the official Republican nod, and so they've got their J6 Republican favorites, and so that's part of the reason. I am kind of a black sheep of the Republican Party. I registered as a Republican solely for Donald Trump and his first run. Before that, I was not much of a voter. If anything, I would vote independent, and I voted. I voted in ignorance too, because I voted for Barack Obama twice. But now that we have this knowledge, we've got to make the right choices for our state, and it's more important now than ever to increase our freedom movement geopolitical footprint within Washington in order to help quell the corporate oppression that the current establishment has here in this state.
Yep, absolutely. And so, where can people go to get in contact with you
Yeah.
or follow you?
You can always get a hold of me on X at bootlegger BOOTLEGGER 777. I check that often, and also my public email is zfgfafo at Gmail.
Nice, the email. I like that. Well, Mark, it's been amazing having you on. I know there's a lot more for us to discuss and go over, but I think this is, this is a good start, and it's given people a nice, context of your story and your experience and what you've gone through, and you absolutely have been a political prisoner, political hostage. And, and this is a thing that I wanted to bring up earlier. I know there's so many people that fought for our country that were there that day too. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know what the percentage of veterans that were
Yep.
there, and so here you have people that were going basically to defend freedom,
Yeah.
going to stand up for our Constitution. They weren't, as you heard from Mark, like you didn't go wanting to overthrow the government or as an insurrectionist.
No.
That's not what. That's
Actually, I was recorded by the state of DC, the District of DC. I was recorded saying, "Come out of the corporation, join us."
There you go. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
That made me dangerous.
yeah. So this is where goes so against what the narrative has been about J6ers. And so again, I thank you for your courage to speak up, and I blessings to you and your family for what you've gone through. I mean, physically, mentally, spiritually, I can't even imagine the effects that has had on you. And I just pray that there will be complete healing and restoration from all of it. I really, it's such an impact on our nation. We haven't even talked about like this, the impact on our nation and what
Yeah,
this is doing. But I do believe that the tide is turning and that the
it
truth
is.
really will prevail and that the truth really will come out. The truth,
The sooner our characters are repaired, the better.
Yeah.
Because as you know, until that happens, we're reliving January 6th and the maligning and the attack and the destruction, the persecution every day.
Yeah. Which is very sad because it's a lie. It's a
Yep.
lie. It's built on a lie. Yeah.
Yep.
And the people need to know.
The pardon didn't fix anything.
It got you out of the jail and
Yes.
those bad circumstances, but you're right. It didn't fix the
Into the pot, out of the pot, into the fire. So that's what that did. Yeah. But also, it did help very much because I'm able to tell my story to people like you, and I'm able to print. I actually printed an article specifically about some of the treatment in the BOP at Ignite, at the Flame USA. .org, I think it is, and it's the Flame newsletter, or the Flame newsletter USA. It is where I put my article a couple issues ago, and I'm hoping to get a lot of support from the left who talk on NPR about prison reform. Let's go. Let's join together and get our people back to a center where we can agree on certain things and work on those simple aspects. Forget about hating Donald Trump. That's not going to get you anywhere. It's not going to get you what you want. No. You're basically just crying about it, but you're not putting the Neosporin on it to get it healed. Okay.
Right. We need to focus on policy. We need to
let's focus on policy, because what's happening now is a tremendous opportunity in Washington State to actually make headway and break some of these super PACs that have been taking corporate money and diluting our elections. Yep. For both sides.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And do you have the link to the article on your account somewhere? Maybe if people can.
Yeah. So let me send you an email, and maybe you can tag it on to this video on the link. I'll send you that, and then please, there is no money in being political. At this level, especially as an activist. If you can, MJ will file some links, and please, $5 is you know what I mean? I'm just saying, like, I'm not asking for somebody to fund my life, one person to fund my life, but I am asking, and I do need it just for simple things like ivermectin and fenbendazole to detox from parasites. It's about those things are about $20 a piece, and to have that money, I don't really have any other income at this time. I don't have a vehicle, so I can't get a job. So there's a lot of things that need to happen for me to get to even a status where I can attempt to enter society.
Yep.
To begin my healing, my financial healing.
Yeah, because you haven't been able to work for, for 5 years. I mean, it's we didn't even talk about the impact of that and where you're at, but I'm glad I had
a 6-figure sales job, and it's gone.
Do you have a GoFundMe page or something like that, Mark?
Yeah, I have a GiveSendGo page, and I also use Venmo and Cash App, because sometimes people don't have that option to bless, or they want to avoid some of the time delays or the fees associated. And so I do offer my Cash App and Venmo as well, and that also helps out very much, because then I don't have to wait 5 days or 10 days before the funds are actually deposited to my bank account.
Right.
So that helps.
Yeah, we'll be happy to put those
But I'll,
links on there. I think
yep,
that's really important. And I know this is true for most of our J6ers. That's in the position y'all are in. And I know John Cameron, who I, said earlier that I interviewed, and I know John, he's trying to get the Washington State J6ers together to help support each other, to help, build you guys back up. I mean, you guys have been torn down and torn down and torn down in so many
right.
different ways. And so, yes, if you can support Mark or any of the J6ers, please do. And
Yep.
let's help them get healthy and healed again and help the story get out. So thank you again, Mark, for taking your time. I hope to have you back on here and we can dive into some of these other areas that we, kind of had to brush over. But I really pray for healing in every single, form of the word. I really do.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I
You
appreciate
bet.
it. And I want to say a special thanks to Brian Noble.
Yes, absolutely. Brian Noble connected us. So I'll make sure that he hears that as well. Thanks, Mark. Blessings to you.
You too. You guys are amazing. Bye.